Hello, this is Miss Dagenford, and I wanted to go over the rest of the organelles for you for a typical eukaryotic cell. And so, where we left off last week, we were talking about the endomembrane system, the organelles that were involved in making proteins. And so, just a quick review here's our slide on slide 19. I had given you, just for your thinking, especially over your homework, was to kind of practice all of the organelles. And so here is an example of the endomembrane system at work. This is the normal protein that's found on the membrane in your lung cell, and it's got a long name. It's called the cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator. Here, uh, here it is in the membrane, and you're going to see that it's labeled CFTR, definitely less of a mouthful. And so this membrane protein, normally what it does is it transports chloride ions, and then it ends up being really important for the water that's lining our lung tissue. And so in normal lungs, it helps maintain or regulate chloride ions and then therefore water. But in cystic fibrosis, something's gone wrong with that protein. Either it's made incorrectly or it's transported incorrectly. And so let's just real quickly take a review of all of the organelles we did last week. So, for instance, we have the gene or the DNA for making CFTR. And remember, that's going to be found in our nucleus. And so the gene for CFTR is going to code for the protein CFTR. And so here in the rough ER, we're going to see a ribosome make the CFTR protein. Remember, ribosomes make proteins. Then it's going to go. It's going to be worked on by the rough ER. It's going to be modified, and then it's going to be sent to the Golgi body, where it's also going to be finished and then transported to the membrane. And so that's what happens normally. And it's just a good example of a type of protein that can be made. And we saw other types like the plasma membrane or the blood types, cell signaling. These are all proteins that are going to be made by the ribosomes that are on the rough ER. Now, ribosomes can also be found in the cytoplasm, and they're making proteins too. But the ribosomes that are found on the rough ER, they're going to be for the membrane or outside the cell. So, those were the protein factory organelles, but what are some of the other organelles that we have? Well, we have the lysosomes, and the lysosomes actually come from the Golgi body. And the lysosomes are going to contain really powerful enzymes. They're called hydrolytic enzymes. And basically, they break down things. So anything that the cell has to break down, this could be old organelles or damaged organelles. Maybe this is food being brought into the cell. A lot of one-celled organisms, that's how they digest. So the lysosome can digest other molecules. They can break things down. The smooth ER is, while it's continuous with the rough ER, it doesn't make proteins. It's not part of the protein factory. But what it does do is it produces lipids like oils and fats and steroids. And those are going to be really important for organs in animals and humans that make steroid hormones, like the testes or the ovaries or the adrenal glands that make steroid hormones like testosterone or estrogen. Those cells are going to have a lot of smooth ER because they're manufacturing these steroids and lipids. So the smoothie R is not going to be focused on proteins, it's going to be focused on oils and fats and steroids and also detoxifying toxins and poisons. Um, the liver has a lot of smoothie R because it's involved in detoxification. One way I like to remember it is I kind of think of a bottle of oil and think about how smooth oil looks, or people use oil for their skin to make it look smooth. And that's just a way I like to remember it. In the picture, you can see the difference between the two. The rough ER is going to have the ribosomes, the smooth ER does not. And this is just a little clip that will help you just kind of see how the ER is actually
The
very
endoplasmic
fluid
reticulum is a
and
highly dynamic network
very
of interconnected
dynamic.
tubules that
It
spans the
actually
cytosol of a
moves.
eukaryotic cell, like a spider's web. The network is continually reorganizing, with some connections being broken while new ones are being formed.
Notice that the
Motor
ER
proteins
is
moving along
very
microtubules
movable
can
and
pull out
fluid.
sections of endoplasmic
One thing I
reticulum
hope you
membranes
guys
to form
understand and
extended
get
tubules that
is
then
that
fuse to form a
these
network.
organelles are going to be dynamic. They're not these static pictures. They actually change, which is just, it's kind of weird to wrap your head around. At this point, we're going to move on, but this video we're going to watch at the end of class, and I want you to be able to identify some of the organelles that we watch. Now, part of the inside of the cell is going to be this internal framework that creates the shape of the cell. Especially in animal cells that don't have a cell wall, we need something that helps maintain the shape. And much like the internal steel framework of a building, we have proteins that form fibers. And these fibers are going to form the cytoskeleton. And it kind of gives a very semi rigid form of the cell. One of these is called microtubules. And these microtubules are great big protein structures that can hold the shape of the cell. They can also move organelles around the cell. And then oftentimes there are these little proteins that ride the microtubules like highways. And you can see there's one in this picture. There's a little motor protein, and it's going to look like he's walking along this microtubule here, and it's carrying a vesicle. So very dynamic part of the cell. So let's wrap up with some organelles that are involved in energy. So we have the mitochondria, and the mitochondria is going to be, you know it as the powerhouse of the cell. Well, that's true, but what does that mean? Well, powerhouse of the cell means that it's going to be producing a molecule called ATP. We're going to talk about this in a few weeks from now, so I just want to give you a real quick introduction to it. So the mitochondria converts the energy in our foods to this ATP. What I would like you to be able to recognize would be the shape of this mitochondria. This outer membrane, which is very smooth, and then this inner membrane that has a lot of curves to it and folds. That's very distinguishing, very distinctive to a mitochondria. That's how you can distinguish mitochondria from our chloroplasts. So you should know the outer membrane, the inner membrane with the folds, and then the space between the folds, and then the matrix, which is that very inner part of it. Now, the mitochondria takes the food we eat and converts it to ATP. The chloroplasts, which are only found in plants, the chloroplasts take sunlight and convert it to food, energy. You know that from your middle school days. So the chloroplast is going to be involved in capturing light energy and producing food, sugars. And how it does that, it's got an outer and inner membrane similar to the mitochondria, but it's got these stacks of membrane called thylakoids, and I know that's kind of bizarre. And so what the thylakoids do, they're in stacks called grana, and the thylakoids, they're the ones that capture the light energy, so they're light dependent, and they're going to produce ATP. And that ATP, that energy molecule, is going to be used to make sugars. That's where we see the Calvin cycle in the stroma. And the stroma would be this light tan area surrounding the thylakoids. So the mitochondria produces ATP from the sugars we eat, and then the chloroplast uses light energy to make those sugars. And then we're just going to wrap it up with a couple of other organelles that are unique to plants, one of which is the vacuole. And the vacuole is this large central organelle that is really taking the bulk of the cytoplasm. And the vacuole's job is to store. It can store water, it can store food, it can store waste. But mainly, what it does is it stores water, and it fills up, and it creates this pressure that maintains the shape of the cell. In a plant that's wilting and droopy, we would see a vacuole that's really low on water. And because it's low on water, it's like a water balloon that's kind of sad and limp. And so that vacuole is usually supposed to be full of water. And then the last part that we see in plants would be the cell wall. And the cell wall is this very thick green structure surrounding the cell membrane. And we see cell wall, at least this type of cell wall we see in plants. It's made of cellulose, and it helps maintain the shape and rigidity of plants, the plant stems and leaves. That's what helps keep their shape. And hopefully by now we can do a quick little review. What are some of these other organelles you see? Um, for instance, you should recognize this is a mitochondria right here. Plants do have mitochondria. Let's see if you can pick out, I wonder what this kind of bluish teal organelle is right here. And then I'll give you a hint. Here's another organelle. And look, it has some dots on it, and those dots are going to be ribosomes. And then you have some more that don't have dots on it. And so we can see if we can recognize some of these. So this might be a good place to pause. And hopefully you remembered that this structure that has all of the ribosomes would be the rough ER. And then this structure that does not have the ribosomes would be the smooth ER. And then this teal kind of color would be the Golgi body. And then this large one, I don't think anybody would have a problem. That's the nucleus of the plant cell. What we want to talk about next is, I keep talking about these organelles as being membranes, and this membrane and that endomembrane. Well, what in the world is the deal with the membrane? So that's what we're going to look at for our next video lesson. Have a nice day.